Masicho. I'd like to welcome a speaker from Mexico. He is Guillermo Espinosa Velasco. He is the director for Instituto Nacional Indigenesta. And I welcome him to come and say a few words to us.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much.
Señora representante de la distinguida
Representative
Mrs. Boutros Ghali,
of the distinguished Mrs. Boutros Ghali, His Excellency Dr. Samuel Inzanale, representatives of the Indian people of North America. The cultural diversity is a constant element in our daily life, and its importance is increasing daily, sometimes as a possible source of conflict and others as a proposal for other alternatives or options for our future. In any event, it is clear that cultural plurality will be in the mind of all nations because the prevailing economic order is prevalent. However, we still do not appreciate sufficiently the wealth that the wisdom and the knowledge of the Indian people throughout the world are not sufficiently known. They constitute alternative epistemologies, as was indicated at the 1992 Rio de Janeiro conference. It is the hour of the fragility of the environment. We know today that conservation of geoplasm, which is crucial for the planet, is concentrated in the areas of the world inhabited by indigenous people. This is a fact that has been documented by university-type research, and it is clearly the result or the consequence of the actions of the indigenous people. Apart from this, it does not seem to be possible to study fully the indigenous wisdom through academic work because these are very different approaches to reality. For example, some Indians believe that knowledge has will, whereas the universities do not have this as a hypothesis. The indigenous wisdom chooses whoever is to be their spokesman. They choose their own leaders and spokesmen. Even so, each one must follow his or her paths more intensely by seeking dialogue among men. The Mayan people has conserved its own culture in the Yucatan Peninsula, and at present has a soil classification that is more precise than those known internationally, and it has a biodiversity that is up to 80% in its own land. The Mayan achievements, as expressed in the archaeological sites, expresses the Mayan creations and participation through them and through the work of university scholars. This is how the work has been done and will continue to be done. The Huicholes have carried out practices to combine collectivity with individuality or individualism. This, the individuality, can only be expressed fully within a community or collectivity because there is an incessantly created complementarity, and I'm not just referring to words here, I'm referring to meanings that go beyond words and that involve pilgrimages and understanding that has to go beyond words. And it is in pilgrimages such as this where one goes to sacred places, which is where the
con los dioses.
dialogue with the gods is reconstructed, that this wisdom is attained. And this is a kind of dialogue that cannot be described in words. As they have said here themselves, we reflect their culture, and the Huicholes thank the government for helping them, and we would like to say that we thank you for helping us. Because of the cultural diversity, we must reflect on the possibilities of harmonious coexistence among those of us who believe that equality of treatment is a goal that we must all have in mind and that we must all reach, while at the same time defending the right to cultural diversity, which is a source of wealth to all of us, and more than this, which can be a true path towards collective survival. That is why we must talk about pueblos in the plural, peoples, people who live within a national entity in the various parts of the world. As the Indian people have so rightly pointed out, this is a commitment we must all undertake, every one of us. Thank you very much.
We have a very special guest from the United States government. Ms. Ada Deere is here with us. She's the Assistant Secretary, Indian Affairs, the United States Department of Interior, and we welcome her to say a few words to us.
Thank you. I'm delighted to be here among fellow indigenous people. It is truly an honor to address such an auspicious group, and you are to be commended for convening here to discuss the environment and how we are to survive in harmony with her. I come with greetings from President Bill Clinton, Vice President Al Gore, and Interior Secretary Bruce Babbitt. Most importantly, I greet you on behalf of this country's indigenous people. The Year of Indigenous People is a year when we should pay homage to our ancestors, for their spirit, tenacity, and perseverance allows us to gather here today. It is also a time to rededicate ourselves to future generations. We owe our grandchildren the same legacy that our grandparents fought to leave us. They deserve an environment that is clean, a culture that is seeped with tradition and language that celebrate our diversity. We are at a unique cultural crossroads in history. We owe future generations no less than what we have inherited. We must ensure that we embrace the challenges of the 21st century on our own terms. Tribal knowledge and tradition are the keys to the future. You should know and understand that I'm a member of the Menominee Indian tribe of Wisconsin. The tribe still resides on our ancestral lands, which are critical to lending an understanding of who we are as indigenous people. I was born on the Menominee Indian Reservation, a land of dense, beautiful forests, a winding wild river and streams and lakes that nourish the land, the animals, and the people. I am an extension of this environment that has fostered my growth and enriched my vision. An appreciation and reverence for the land is fundamental to being Indian. Personally, you should know that 40 years ago, my tribe, the Menominee, was terminated. 20 years ago, we were restored, and today, I stand before you as a true survivor of Indian policy. As indigenous people, we know that internal and external policies have tremendous implications upon our lives. We must strive to set policy rather than be victimized by it. And I'd like to emphasize this. We must strive to set policy rather than to be victimized by it. Allow me to give you one such example, for it was one of the most compelling times in my life. It involved the termination and restoration of my tribe. Pardon my brief historical account. Through an understanding of history, this empowers us with the lessons of the past. You should know and understand that I'm a member of the Menominee tribe of Wisconsin. The tribe still resides on our ancestral lands, which are critical to lending an understanding of who we are as indigenous people. I'm proud to say that my tribe has lived for thousands of years, at least 5,000 years, on the lands in Wisconsin. I was born on the Menominee Reservation. My tribe's land was held by a state-chartered tribal corporation. The Termination Act stripped us of our treaty-guaranteed exemption from taxation, and our tribal leaders were forced to begin to sell off ancestral land to pay state taxes. This was during the termination period. A terrible period. By the 1960s, my people were in despair. Poverty had sunk to new depths, and we faced the loss of our land, tribal identity, and culture. My own personal choice was clear, and I'd like to emphasize this. We all have personal choices in our communities, in our families, in our tribes. Personal choices. My choice: I had to leave law school, return to the reservation, and create a coalition of tribal leaders to reverse termination. The 1950s and 1960s were a low period for Indian people in the U.S. If we were not terminated, then we were often relocated to urban areas in an effort to assimilate us into mainstream culture. During this period, the Menominee collectively discovered the kind of determination that human beings find in times of impending destruction. Against all odds, we invented a new policy, restoration. Now, again, I would like to emphasize this. We, the Menominees, invented a new policy, restoration. This is the possibility. This is the challenge that indigenous peoples in the hemisphere and across the world can exert and accept. You don't have to accept the policies. You can work to change them. Finally, after grueling work by more people than I could ever thank, our coalition pushed the Menominee Restoration Act through the U.S. Congress. This act is a vivid reminder of how tribal people can hold other sovereign entities accountable. In short, we couldn't afford to agonize. We had to organize. Later this year, on December 22nd, my tribe, the Menominee, will celebrate the 20th anniversary of restoration. Now, just think, from termination to restoration. We're also celebrating a sacred vision that has been maintained by our leaders for generations. In the program, we have many voices, many prophecies from the tribal indigenous peoples here. My people, too, have visions. And I want to challenge each of you to think of your tribal vision and how you can then implement this vision. The forest on our reservation is a vivid tribute to that vision. Recently, the Rainforest Action Network declared that our forest is better today than it was 100 years ago. Through modern forest management, our forest is better today than 100 years ago. And I think that's a wonderful achievement. This is a grand legacy and speaks to our spirit and tenacity as tribal people. Despite what the prevailing U.S. federal policy may have been, our forefathers and mothers always realized that we were extensions of the land, and if we cared for it, then it would care for us. The true essence of sustainability. I thank you for being here today. Be assured you have an indigenous voice in this vast government, and I know personally the ramifications of culturally appropriate and sustainable development. Tribal knowledge and sustainability are contemporary concepts that are essentially manifestations of age-old tribal customs. Thus, Remember, we must reflect on the wisdom of the past before we plan for the future. And all of us, in our capacities as individual members, as tribal members, as members of government, have the challenge and the responsibility to think 7 generations before us. The decisions that we make today will impact 7 generations. It's a heavy responsibility that our forefathers and foremothers undertook, and we must keep this in mind as we proceed in our tribes and in our governmental decisions. Thank you.
And now we have a message from the Vice President of the United States, Al Gore. As many of you know, he's written a book on sustainable development that many academics and people who work on theories of environment have read. But the voice of our people today is to be heard, and he has sent a message to us. We have with us Ambassador Victor Marrero, the U.S. representative to the UN Council on Economic and Social Council. Please welcome.
Thank you very much. On behalf of Ambassador Albright, who is the permanent representative of the United States to the United Nations, on my own behalf, I wish you all the best in your conference today. As was indicated, I have a message to read from Vice President Al Gore, who sent the note to the North American spiritual elders, care of Ms. Karine Courtright. And the message reads as follows. Dear friends, I would like to take this opportunity to send my regards to you, the North American spiritual elders, as you come together for the cry of the earth, the legacy of the First Nations in New York. I regret that I am unable to attend such an unprecedented gathering of leaders of indigenous peoples. As you know, President Clinton and I share your commitment to protecting our nation's environment. It is altogether fitting that you should be holding this conference in the year of the world's indigenous peoples. President Clinton and I understand that there is much to learn from the ancient wisdom of the past that you know so well as we chart our new directions for the future. I commend your efforts to address the important issue of environmentally sustainable policies and practices and their connection to indigenous peoples. Native American peoples have been instrumental in addressing natural resource issues, mostly as a fundamental aspect of their traditional lifestyles. In our time of concern for sustainable living and the preservation of the miraculous diversity found in our nation and on our planet, we can certainly stand to learn a great deal from the indigenous peoples of North America. We must all work together to protect our natural heritage, our flora, our fauna, and the overall health of our global environment. These goals have always been an integral part of the spiritual traditions of those native to the soil of the Americas. Please keep me apprised of the accomplishment of this meeting as well as any future events inspired by your conference. Again, thank you for the invitation to speak. I wish you much success in all your future endeavors. Sincerely, signed, Al Gore. Thank you very much.